Alright, I think I figured out how I want to present these segments of the series. I want them to be focused on each candidate in the Shakespeare conspiracy, authorship controversy. Starting with Thomas North, because this is the only candidate that, after a lot of research and a lot of consideration, that I still allow, in my own opinion, to be a true candidate. I still, romantically, would love for William Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon to be the author. Everybody would. The idea that a self-made man could not only be a self-made man, but be the greatest artist of a millennium. And a lot of people consider the author of the Shakespeare canon as the greatest genius of the arts from 1000 AD to 2000 AD. Most Shakespeare fans aren't even familiar with Thomas North at all. Even people in the involved heavily in the Shakespeare authorship controversy, you say Thomas North, they don't know who you're talking about. Whoever wrote Shakespeare was indebted specifically to their sources for the 38 plays. You add the apocryphal, all the plays that have William Shakespeare as the author, there's 5 more that Shakespearean scholars do not even consider. Number one, because they're not in the famous First Folio, 1623, and because they are really of a different style than the norm in the Shakespeare canon. Like the Yorkshire tragedy, the play about Sir Thomas More, London Prodigal, I think, is one of them. Anyway, but whoever was the author was indebted to specifically 2 authors when it comes to history. Holinshed, I think his name was, Holinshed's English history, and Plutarch of Greece. Plutarch was translated by Thomas North in a very famous edition in 1579. Thomas North was born in 1535. He was knighted in 1591, mainly for his expertise in the Spanish Armada. But he had been at court in very intricate, even under-the-table negotiation, very delicate ambassadorial missions to different countries. He was entrusted by Queen Elizabeth on a number of occasions, mainly because of his fluency in foreign languages. He was fluent in French and all the key languages at the time that with countries that Queen Elizabeth was having direct conflict or important interactions with. But he had a little bit of a problem because his older brother was superior to him in all matters of, just in the family business, family finances, and anything relative to his personal fortune was superseded by his brother, the 2nd Baron North. Their father, the 1st Baron North, was an important aristocrat. Thomas North was brilliant. I mean, just brilliant in every kind of way. In practical knowledge. God, I can't believe this is happening. Hold on. Just whenever I'm trying to do something important, some bug flies in the goddamn lens. Anyway, very important person who is totally, really explicitly underappreciated in Elizabethan studies. He was right up there in importance with Francis Drake and Walsingham. With regard to what he was entrusted with, Walter Raleigh is looked at as important and significant but a failure, whereas, Francis Drake was looked at with the same importance but as a hero of victory. Yeah, basically Francis Drake stole more gold. But no, he won the Spanish Armada. But Thomas North was right there as a captain in all of that victorious interchange. Thomas North translated Plutarch in a very, very polished English in 1579. It's significant because before that he had written a book called The Dial of Princes, which I believe came out in 1550s, in the 1550s, like 1557. Now, John Lyly is credited usually with that high, flowery, simile-grounded prose of English, which you see in Shakespeare, the very, very, very refined language that you find in Shakespeare. John Lyly is given credit as the person who put that out there as a vogue. That is a mistake. The person who did that was Thomas North. If you read, nobody reads The Dial of Princes. Nobody. They don't teach that anywhere. But if you get a hold of it, you'll see that's where it started. Actually started with Thomas North. Jeez, look at this. There. Killed it. Killed the fly. Landed on the... Is it dead? Landed on the LCD screen. So it won't be flying in your face anymore. Now there's another one. Jeez, the summer. Fucking June 29th. I got flies everywhere. Because of the cats in the alley. Poop all over the place. Oh well. Well, I wanted this video to be... I'd probably erase it and do it. I don't like the Shakespeare authorship discussions because you're always dealing with people who believe what they're saying. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say I believe any of this because that's just wrong, because you could be wrong. No matter how much these ideas make sense, you can always say, well, Shakespeare knew him. And they were friends or something, and, you know, because Shakespeare, say like Shakespeare was Shakespeare. They've said for years that it's Julius Caesar, Coriolanus, and anything that had to do with the Romans or the Greeks, he took explicitly out of the work of North, his translations of Plutarch's lives, those biographies of the great military leaders of antiquity. Definitely. I mean, there's just no question about that. He even lifts actual prose out of North with the same words and puts them in his plays. The only time he does that. So that's significant. It's the only time he actually plagiarizes somebody specifically word for word. Shakespeare plagiarized Thomas North. If what he did, if he did it today, if an author did that today without, you know, a contracted obligation to give royalties to this person that he took the words from, he'd be taken to court for a lot of money for plagiarism. Shakespeare was horrible about lifting whole themes from Italian plays of established playwrights in Italy. If you did that today, you're in court. Shakespeare, you know, brought back today would be called a hack. Seriously. I mean, he's seriously just a guy who stole other people's ideas. And made money from it. I mean, just he was a shareholder in the Globe Theatre. Made money from stealing other people's ideas. But it was pretty commonplace back then, but he was actually way worse at doing that than other authors. Say, like you're talking about John Fletcher or Ben Jonson, Christopher Marlowe. Those guys were original. Their plots, their main themes, their ideas that they conjured the story out of were their own ideas. The only plays in all of Shakespeare where he had an original idea that you cannot find it stolen from somebody else are The Tempest, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and Love's Labour's Lost. Now, Love's Labour's Lost is a significant consideration with regard to the idea that Thomas North was Shakespeare. And here's why. And this is, I'll give kudos to Dennis McCarthy in his book, North of Shakespeare, for I mean, I knew about the association, I'm going to explain here in a second, but he found something that I'd never heard of. In 1574, Thomas North, accompanying his brother, the second Baron North, went as an embassy to France to speak on behalf of Queen Elizabeth to ask the French court to give reprieve to the Huguenots who were being persecuted in France. Henry of Navarre had just, I think he had just become King of France, or he was the King of Navarre at the time. He was still the King of Navarre. He definitely became King of France later. Well, anyway, his military leaders that the King of Navarre had with him, the same names, Baron, Longueville, Dumaine, are all names of the principal characters in Love's Labour's Lost. Now, people knew that already. What they didn't know was the liaison between the brothers North and the court was a man named Moth. Now, Moth is a character in Love's Labour's Lost as a go-between for the princess of France. Now, I had never heard of that before, and I think that cinches at least something that has got to be looked into very explicitly. Now, the Vere adherents, the people that believe, the Oxfordians, the people that believe that Edward de Vere was Shakespeare, they have all kinds of anecdotes like this. But this is bigger. This is just too much of a coincidence. That every character, at least with de Vere, he changes the names. If Hamlet is supposed to be a biography about de Vere and his crisis with Lord Burleigh, where he's Polonius and Ophelia is, Burleigh's daughter. But, the names are different, and it's all subjective. With Love's Labour's Lost, there's just no doubt about it. Every name's the same. And why? I mean, just why? Because when you're talking about the Love's Labour's Lost, those captains that are working with the king, there's no reason to put those names in there because there's nothing in association of that play that has anything to do with the politics for which North was sent over as an embassy. It really rings of a guy who was just so amazed by the characteristics of the people that he had met that he thought, wow, these people are going to go down in history with the humor of their lives not known. I want to immortalize how fun these people are in private when the politics are over with. And that's the way it comes off. What's interesting is the Don Armado, a character in Love's Labour's Lost. Like, who is that? Because he's the big comical character in that play. And so, in that whole scheme of association, who's Armado? It'd be fun to try to discover that, because the tendency seems to have been, at least in that composition, that he wanted to portray something that he actually observed. And since Love's Labour's Lost has no basis to it other than historical people, what they've always had, but they always, when they talked about Love's Labour's Lost and the King of Navarre's military leaders in Dumaine and Longueville, they were talking about things that happened in about 1589, when Henry of Navarre became King of France. What this idea is, with North being Shakespeare, it's something that happened way before, in the 1570s. So with that in mind, if you look at the biographies of those people, you might find a lot more. Now, I haven't. I don't know how to get a hold of, good research about those people. Like the Princess of France and her ladies-in-waiting. What really throws a wrench in it is there's the Pilatus Tamia by the author in the 1598. It was a man that came out with a book, just talking about the good playwrights and poets of the time. And he lists Shakespeare's plays up to that point. Now, this is what gives good argument to the time period of Shakespeare's productions being in the 1590s, because he only names the first 11 plays or something, 12, I think. Does not mention Henry V or Julius Caesar or Hamlet or anything like that. He mentions the early ones, like Comedy of Errors, Love's Labour's Lost, Midsummer Night's Dream. But you know what I mean. So the people, the Stratfordians got these point because everything matches up practically in terms of practicality of the lifetime scheme of William Shakespeare of Stratford. Because the idea is that he started writing or putting plays on the stage around 1590, and when Pilatus Tamia was put out there in 1598, that's about how many plays he would have had done by then. And the style of those plays has a certain concise way about it, and everything after that seems to progress as you know, authors would change their style over time. So the inference that North was Shakespeare is that either he wrote some of his plays in the 1570s or 80s, took a break, or sold them to the theater in the 1590s, and that's when they started to come out. Who knows? The conspiratorial idea is that William Shakespeare is either a person who was pretending to be an author, or was a pen name, or an actor who was used as a scapegoat in case, you know, some political upheaval happened and they needed a scapegoat to go to the Tower if some of the plays were too controversial for Elizabeth's taste. Maybe North was ostracized and he was in trouble all the time and he could not possibly put his name on anything that was controversial. Who knows? There is a truth that North ran into financial difficulties in the mid-1590s, and he didn't receive a pension from Elizabeth until 1601. He only lived 3 more years, I think. I think he died in 1604 or 1606. John Lively died in 1606. Damn, that fucking ice cream truck again. I kind of hate my life. I want out of here. I want something that matters. God damn. I don't want to be in this basement talking about this shit anymore. I hate ice cream trucks driven by black men that are selling marijuana to kids. The stupid music from the fucking The Sting. It's like, come on, that's ragtime music from 110 years ago. Play something else. Alright, I'm a jerk. But, alright, this is my Thomas North video. I should do another one to make it a little bit more dignified. And look it up. If you're interested in this kind of thing, I'm going to state clearly in all my Shakespeare videos that I do not believe, by any stretch, that Shakespeare could have been Edward de Vere. I concede that the events of de Vere's life could have been inspiration for the author. But that man was deplorable. He was just an aristocrat. He was just a spoiled aristocrat. I don't care. Anything, you know, there's so many people that just worship de Vere as Shakespeare unfailingly. I don't care what matches up with the biography and the things in the plays. If somebody worked for him as his servant and witnessed all this, they could just be inspired to write. It doesn't mean it's him. His writing is definitely of no near the caliber of the author of the Shakespeare canon. There's nothing, even in letters, poetry, or anything by Edward de Vere that is good at all. None of it's interesting. All of his letters are just pathetic whining, begging for money from a drunken aristocrat. He was silly. He was ridiculous. He was bailed out of everything. He sold his family lands just so he could party. I mean, he had no respect for his history, his place in history, his status. All he cared about was being a bum, drinking, and just frolicking around. He was a failure. And an idiot. A moron. And I mean, William Shakespeare was not a moron. In fact, more than that, he was a high-minded philosopher. What I will give somebody in tandem with de Vere is that Shakespeare was also a thief, an unconscionable thief. He had no respect for other people's work. He would steal anything he thought was interesting. And that really, and he changed history. He had no qualms about lying. And he wasn't as smart as people think. He has a play in Troilus and Cressida where he antedates he antedates Hector of Troy with Aristotle. He has Hector of Troy quoting Aristotle. I mean, that's just a fool. I mean, that was a no-brainer. I mean, you know, yeah, sure, you couldn't get an encyclopedia back then to check your sources, but geez, that's a big screw-up. That's stupid. That's just flagrant stupidity. And here and there in the Shakespeare canon, you get flagrant stupidity along with the high genius. So he was a man, you know, he was a man with faults. And not to mention his play structure was really, you know, there's nothing real about it. There's nothing to be believed about, you know, the way things go. It's all according to dramatic formula. Even Tolstoy said that. He said, look, Shakespeare might have been a great poet. He might have been great at putting characters out there that are compelling, but there's nothing about the stories that are believable. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And in tragedy, at least, there should be moments where you can feel, you know, at one with the characters. And Shakespeare does cheat past that with the compelling personal aspects of the characters, but there's nothing about the plot. There's nothing about the actual cause and effect in a Shakespeare play that rings true about anything in real life, even among aristocratic warfare. All right, I gotta stop this one. But whoever Shakespeare was, he had to be very, very familiar with military maneuvers. Very, very familiar with ostracism. As far as, like, you know in Shakespeare how, like, there's always a bastard kid or someone who's just going nuts about their inheritance or being ostracized, a brother that's treated bad, or a servant that's... There's always the division between this guy's got the fortune and this guy's got the misfortune. Well, with Thomas North's life, that happened. His brother tried to cheat him out of everything, just like Orlando in As You Like It and the two dukes in As You Like It. As You Like It, in fact, they think is the most biographical of all of North's, potential North being Shakespeare plays, because there's a story about Edmund Spenser, the famous poet, courting North's daughter, just like in As You Like It, where he's putting poetry in trees and stuff. So the idea is that the banished Duke of As You Like It is Thomas North, and Spenser is Orlando, but with circumstances brought in from the life of Thomas North when he's younger. And it all comes together, just as much as you could say the characters of Shakespeare match up with De Vere's life. So the next one I'm going to do is De Vere. I'm going to slam De Vere. I mean, I really just going to go bam, 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 bam. Sorry, I have looked into this. There is no way Edward de Vere was William Shakespeare. At the moment, I think he was either Thomas North or somebody who was Thomas North's scribe, who also worked for de Vere. Now, de Vere and Thomas North knew each other intimately. Intimately. I mean, that circle in the 1570s is key to understanding this possibility. William Shakespeare was either a genius that really heard about all of these interactions of the 1570s in Elizabethan court, put them down on paper, just was, you know, idolized the historical authors of the time, and Christopher Marlowe, or it's the complete opposite, where Thomas North was just this secret author who had these private parties. Here's another thing I want to say. You know how there's no reference to Shakespeare plays among the contemporaries? Like, they never say, oh, I just saw King Lear. Especially in the early 1590s. There's a chance that everything that was printed in 1623 in the folio was never performed. Never. Except in private. At North's estates or among the aristocrats. There's a chance that none of those plays, as we have them, were performed on the public stage at the Globe. Except for the ones that he sold to William Shakespeare, who changed the words, and the bad quartos that are in existence from the 1590s, where the words are all different, all the lines are different, where Hamlet is totally different, were just revisions by William Shakespeare to make them more accessible to the idiots on the south bank of the Thames. Now that makes sense. There's a chance that the great Shakespeare plays that we know were never seen by the public in the 1590s in London. Alright, I'm done with that. But when you're talking about William Shakespeare, you got to get down to practicalities. The practicalities of the theater. You got to tell actors what their motivation is. You got to be right there directing the production, or they're not going to get it. That was high English at a time where they were illiterate people in London. Only a few writers wrote like that. Everybody else talked different. It was a scatological, morphing English. It was still a maturation process of English as we know it. That high-sounding rhetoric of the great authors at the time was not the norm among the readership. What throws all of this off is Venus and Adonis and Rape of Lucrece, because those were documented to have been printed and best-selling poems in 1593 and 1594, with the name William Shakespeare attached. The idea that the high-minded readership did not squawk and talk about who is William Shakespeare is a mystery, because they would want to know. And if they knew, somebody would have said something, and nobody did. Maybe William Shakespeare was a time traveler. I don't know. Maybe he was from Mars. Maybe he was an interdimensional jerk that just showed up and left. Showed up, dropped off his poetry, and went back to the other dimension. That's just as believable as anything else.